If there's one thing we all share in common, it's that we're all the main characters of our own story. How that story pans out is ultimately up to us. You might say that no one truly views themselves as the villain, and that history is only written by the victors. But there's been an idea in my head that's been gnawing at me for quite some time. Why do so many modern-day protagonists in movies and video games rub me the wrong way? What's this shifting undertone that's captured so many different media franchises? And why do I have such a hard time rooting for these characters? It's a bit of a complex topic, but I believe the answer has to do with the rise of self-interest over the common good. Or selfishness, to put it bluntly.
Back in the day, we had figures like Superman, who embodied the classic ideals of truth, justice, and the American way. He's larger than life, a symbol of pure heroism. On paper, Superman should be the ultimate superhero. Bro has nearly every power imaginable, which sounds like it should be the coolest thing ever. He literally has all the cheat codes enabled at the same time. Should at least try to hide it.
But time and again, his portrayals in movies and video games seem to fall flat. And I don't think that's a coincidence.
I don't think that every Hollywood director just forgot how to make movies. Instead, I think it suggests a deeper issue. The flawless protagonist isn't just unrelatable, he's uninteresting. Superman's only weakness is a green rock from another planet that reminds him that he forgot to extend his car's factory warranty. Otherwise, there's no enemy too strong, no obstacle too great that this bro can't falcon punch his way out of. And yet, while he may not be the most relatable hero, it's hard to argue against his motives. Fighting to protect the world requires sacrifice. Sacrifice commands respect. But Superman isn't human. As for the rest of us, people are flawed, and we make mistakes. And maybe it's just the emo kids of the world, but people want characters that feel like us. Flawed, messy, and yeah, with some smudgy eyeliner. My parents don't understand me. Take Arthur Morgan from Red Dead Redemption 2. A rugged outlaw riding through a dying Wild West. All in loyalty to his gang, he's pulling heists and dodging the law to keep his crew afloat. But if you look closer, you see he's wrestling with a ton of baggage. Guilt over his past, doubts about the life he's chosen, and this impending sense that maybe he's just in it for himself. He's not out to save the world. He's merely scraping by, making short-sighted calls like sticking with Dutch, who he knows is losing his mind, or pocketing the money from people he robs instead of playing Robin Hood. Yet as the story unfolds, you see him question everything. Maybe even try to do right by others. But it's still just Arthur's struggle, and not some grand heroic ideal. He isn't a perfect icon. He's someone who's real, someone who'd rather snap back with a revolver instead of turn the other cheek. And this is kind of my point here. Although Arthur is a compelling protagonist for an interesting story, he is by no means what most people would consider a hero. But you know what does make a hero? Making sure to hit that subscribe button. You're doing it again. Doing what? Being cringe. I'm not cringe. It's only cringe if you make it cringe. If you happen to enjoy today's video, please be sure to give it a like or share it with a friend so we can thwart the evil machinations of evildoers. Either way, I appreciate your time, and let's get back to the video.
To see what I mean, we need to understand how the culture has changed over the years. We're living in an age obsessed with individualism. Even in just the past 20 years, social media has only become more and more entrenched in our daily lives. Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, it's all about curating your story, your brand. We're all out here trying to be the main character, and that's changed the very way we see our heroes.
If you went back to the 20th century, you had what? A handful of TV channels and newspapers? Everyone was watching Walter Cronkite or reading the same local paper, so the narrative was more often than not unified. Big events like war stories or moon landings felt like collective wins, and that trickled into the culture. Heroes like Luke Skywalker or Frodo weren't just out for themselves, they were saving the galaxy or carrying the One Ring for the sake of all Middle-earth. Their stories were about sacrifice, duty, and the greater good. Classic ideals that resonated because they reflected a time when people felt more connected to a shared cultural experience. But today, everything is siloed off. There's no one single narrative holding the culture together. No one heroic ideal we all rally behind. I mean, I guess we still have it to some degree, but that crap is weird. Instead, entertainment has become deeply personalized, algorithm-driven, and tailored to the individual.
The same goes for social media, where everyone is their own protagonist, shaping their own personal audience that reinforces their own beliefs. Stories today reflect how we see ourselves, as individuals navigating our own arcs, rather than as players in some grand collective narrative.
And you want to know what else really tightens my butter churn?
What?
Is how a lot of these modern day heroes navigate character growth. or the lack of it rather. In classic hero journeys, strength or wisdom is something that's earned through hardship, failure, or personal growth. With great power comes great responsibility. There's a sense that strength comes with a cost, and it's that cost that makes the character feel human. But recently, we've seen a trend of characters that bypass all that shit altogether. My personal favorite problem child is Rey from the new Star Wars movies. From the moment she picks up that lightsaber, she's extremely OP, defeating trained opponents, mastering the Force with little to no guidance. She's immediately propped up as the new face of the Jedi Legacy, and I'm like,
what? This is outrageous. It's unfair.
How about Captain Marvel of the MCU? I mean, besides having the charisma of a cardboard box, she's introduced as already immensely powerful. Yeah, the movie has these hints of a suppressed past and emotional trauma, but she never struggles or has to grow to overcome these challenges. By the time she fully taps into her power, she's literally unstoppable. There's no sense of vulnerability or possible failure at all. Wow, how moving. Her arc is more about remembering who she is rather than becoming someone better. Like, what? So what the heck am I supposed to get from these movies? When times get tough, just remember to never question yourself and never change. Yeah, that works when I go to the gym. If I can't lift these weights, just remember that I'm perfect the way that I am. Yeah, if I'm terrible at my job, I just have to remember that I already deserve that raise, because that's just how the world works. Look at what Luke had to go through. He loses friends, gets his hand cut off, fails repeatedly, and has to grapple with the truth about his father. He earns the right to be a hero through pain and sacrifice. When characters are handed power without having to struggle for it, the story skips out on one of the most essential parts of human connection, which is growth.
We relate to characters not because they're perfect, but because they strive and fail, just like we do. Without that journey, the protagonist becomes much more of an ideological icon rather than a person, and it's harder to invest in their success.
These aren't the only examples. We've seen this in other franchises where characters are designed this way from the outset. But without a narrative arc that challenges them in meaningful ways, their victories feel hollow. Power without struggle may look impressive, but it rarely resonates. And let's not forget about how streaming services have had an impact on all this. Once upon a time, movies had 2 hours to wrap things up, and network TV shows like Friends tied neat bows on quirky characters every season. Audiences expected clear resolutions, loose ends neatly tied up, conflicts resolved, and heroes, for the most part, doing the right thing. But today, platforms like Netflix, HBO, Hulu allow narratives to sprawl across multiple seasons with no hurry to resolve anything. The structure of storytelling has shifted, favoring slow burn character studies where moral ambiguity isn't just tolerated, it's the whole point. That's where someone like Walter White from Breaking Bad comes in. He starts as a struggling high school chemistry teacher, a man crushed under the weight of financial hardship and a terminal cancer diagnosis. At first, his decision to cook meth feels almost justified. He's doing it for his family, after all. But over 5 seasons, you watch him morph into a ruthless drug kingpin, prioritizing his empire and ego over the very people he claimed to be protecting.
The brilliance of the show lies in how it peels back the layers of his transformation, making it clear that Walter was never just a victim of circumstance. The potential for darkness was always there. It was just waiting for an excuse to emerge.
The extended runtime doesn't force him into a redemption arc by the finale. It lets him stew in his own ambition, every calculated lie, every line he willingly crossed. Each decision he makes pushes him deeper into a world where power and self-interest trump morality, where he stops justifying his actions and starts embracing them. The show takes its time, allowing the audience to witness the slow erosion of his conscience, making his descent feel organic, inevitable, and deeply unsettling, kinda nauseous. The shift in storytelling reflects a broader cultural change. Traditional heroes, noble, self-sacrificing, unwaveringly good, are giving way to characters that are driven by personal ambition, survival, or even revenge. These characters aren't fighting for the greater good, they're fighting for themselves, and we as an audience are captivated by their downfall. The groundwork for all this owes a lot to the anti-hero trend in the mid-2000s. Look at Fight Club, a film that technically came out in 1999 but shaped the next decade's obsession with rebellion, self-destruction, and personal gratification disguised as enlightenment. What's the first rule of Fight Club?
Don't talk about
Always
Fight Club.
bring your own toothbrush. What did I just say? Tyler Durden isn't a hero. He's a charismatic anarchist who convinces disillusioned men that their own self-interest is the key to freedom. He rejects society's rules, not for the greater good, but for his own ideology, one that tears everything down so he can build his own world in its place. Yeah, a real stand-up guy. It's a story about control, manipulation, and the illusion of choice. Themes that would echo into TV shows and gaming as audiences become more fascinated with protagonists who broke the rules, not to save anyone, but to serve themselves.
At the same time in gaming, we had titles like BioShock, the game that took this shift in storytelling and handed control over to the player, only to reveal that we never had any control to begin with.
Jack starts off as a silent protagonist, dropped into the underwater city of Rapture with no clear goal beyond just survival. Bro, I still remember being so creeped out by this place. Andrew Ryan envisioned Rapture as a utopia free from morality, where every individual could pursue their ambitions without interference, and put hooks on their hands for some reason. The result? A crumbling dystopia where self-obsession reigns, where the only rule is power, where the choices you make, harvest or save the little sisters, obey or defy the game's infamous "would you kindly," force you to confront the fact that all along you were just another pawn in someone else's scheme.
BioShock deconstructs the very idea of choice and morality. It asks whether free will even exists in a world driven by personal ambition. While Tyler Durden convinces his followers that destroying the system will set them free, BioShock forces the player to realize they were never the hero of the story, just another player in someone else's power game.
These stories didn't just glorify self-interest. They made us question whether we had any say to begin with. And once that door was open, there was no going back. All the while, chaos in the real world has only fueled this trend further. With economic and social uncertainty turning people inward, the past 20 years have been a constant roller coaster of emotions. Recessions, job droughts, endless culture wars. Man, I gotta sit down, yeah, it's coming back. When stability feels like a myth, and trust in institution crumbles, survival becomes the priority.
That change in mindset has bled into storytelling, where protagonists aren't fighting for a greater cause so much as they're trying to navigate a world that's already been fractured beyond repair.
Enter Katniss Everdeen from the Hunger Games. She's thrust into a revolution, but her core drive is about keeping her sister and herself alive, not fixing Pan Am's whole dystopian mess. Her heroism is reluctant, born out of necessity rather than idealism. Even as she becomes a symbol of rebellion, she never fully embraces the role. She's not out to inspire hope in the masses. She's playing the game, making choices that will ensure her survival first and foremost. Even in the end, she doesn't emerge as a triumphant leader. She escapes, battered and traumatized, simply trying to just exist in the wreckage. Her story reflects the reality of a world where people are exhausted from constant upheaval, where change feels overwhelming, where self-preservation often takes precedence over grand unifying ideals.
That mirrors what we've lived through. When everything feels unsteady, the instinct kicks in to protect yourself and your own, not preach unity. It's a stark contrast from the post-war optimism that birthed brighter, outward-looking heroes.
Compare Katniss to the heroes of the past, like Captain America, whose entire character was built on the idea of sacrificing oneself for the greater good. Bro was straight up jumping on grenades for strangers. I guess that kind of hero made sense in the 20th century, when global cooperation and collective action were still held as ideals.
Who cares? I still love him.
Also, brief spoiler warning if you haven't played The Last of Us. Yes, I know, spoiler warning for a decade-old video game. But look at Joel. Like Katniss, he isn't fighting to rebuild the world. He's fighting to protect the one person he still cares about. When he chooses Ellie over the future of humanity, it's not framed as villainy, but as something deeply human. It's a gut-wrenching moment precisely because it feels real. In a world where everything has already fallen apart, looking out for yourself and your own becomes not just understandable, but inevitable. This newer wave of storytelling reflects the exhaustion of a generation that's been raised in uncertainty.
The financial collapse of 2008, years of social distancing, inflation, and the overwhelming pressure of modern survival have reshaped the very way we see heroism.
People aren't looking for idealized leaders anymore. They're looking for characters who reflect their own struggles, who question, who hesitate, who make messy, self-preserving choices. Today's heroes don't have the luxury of saving the world. They're just trying to make it to tomorrow. The days of the noble, self-sacrificing hero have grown opaque, replaced by characters who are more interested in carving out their own path than holding up some grand ideal.
This change didn't happen overnight. It's been shaped by years of cultural and technological change, from the rise of social media and algorithm-driven content to the long-form storytelling of streaming and video games.
And maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe it's just an honest reflection of where we are. We don't live in a world full of clear-cut good and evil anymore, where heroes swoop in and fix everything.
But with this shift, something has been lost. The idea of the selfless hero, the one who fights not for themselves but for something bigger, is becoming increasingly more rare. The characters we once admired, the Luke Skywalkers, the Frodos, the Captain Americas, are being supplanted by figures like Walter White, Joel, Katniss, characters who are compelling, yes, but are also deeply self-interested. And that makes me wonder, will we ever swing back?
Will there come a time where we crave heroes who remind us that self-sacrifice isn't just naive, but necessary? That fighting for others, not just ourselves, still matters? Or are we too far down the rabbit hole of individualism to go back?
I don't know the answer, but if history has shown us anything, is that stories evolve with the times. And maybe one day, when the world feels a little less fractured, we'll start looking for heroes who stand for more than just themselves. But that just about does it for the video. Thank you so much for watching, and consider liking or subscribing if you made it this far. This is something that I've had in the back of my mind for a while, so I'm glad to finally get a video out about it. But let me know what you guys think about it in the comments. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next one. Love you, bye.
Go, here. Let me go grab this, coronavirus. Wanda, here. Wanda, come.
She can stay.